Thanks for tuning in to another edition of the Business of Fun podcast. I'm your host, Dave Wakeman. My guest today is Paul Bailey, and we are going to talk about brand. Paul is the brand strategy director at Halo Studio in Bristol in the UK. And I wanted to have Paul on to talk about brand because I'm going to be teaching a brand management class later on this year to executive MBA students. I needed some content and some things to give to the students to teach them certain aspects of branding. So the parameters that we set up for our conversations, we're going to talk about things like the top of the funnel, research, and purpose. And a whole lot of interesting stuff. I had 4 or 5 pages of notes, so this one's a really good one. Before we get to talking about Paul, though, I want to remind you to check out my friends at Cover Genius. Cover Genius has this really great tool that has become more and more important, which is cancel for any reason, CFAR. It's come up in a bunch of conversations that we've been having with some of the guests lately. It just was a good reflection of where people are in the market. There's still uncertainty that's going on. When we were in Seattle on the panel with Joanne from Audience View and Kelly from the Playhouse Theater, we talked about how the challenges that people are dealing with when making plans are impacting their ability to buy or their willingness to buy. So CFAR is a great tool. So check it out at Cover Genius. Make sure you check them out if you're at the Ticketing Professionals Conference in Birmingham later this month. Say hello from me. It looks right now like I will not be able to make it this year, but you never know. Who knows? Things get crazy around these parts. Get the Talking Tickets newsletter. It's talkingtickets.substack.com. That's my weekly newsletter on all things tickets. The Business of Value is my home for strategy and branding. You can get that at Business of Fun or businessofvalue.substack.com, or you can get everything if you sign up with a little pop-up box at davewakeman.com. Check out davewakeman.com. There's going to be some new workshops, some new ways to work with me, all kinds of new stuff. And a lot of stuff. It just takes me a little longer than I wish it would to get everything completed and posted. But workshops in London, New York, Sydney, all kinds of great places and great things coming up later on this year. So back to Paul. So Paul Bailey, we talk about metaphor. We talk about the 95-5 rule. We talk about the difference between B2C and B2B. We talk about penetration pricing, 60-40, challenges in branding, sales activation versus brand building, setting objectives, travel, memorable moments and associated memorable moments, personalized marketing. We talk about some examples. Patagonia, Ben & Jerry's, brand purpose and meaning, all distinctive brand assets. We got to a whole lot of stuff. This is a really great episode for people, not just in the world of tickets and entertainment, but anybody who digs brand. So give this one a listen and let me know what you think. I would like to welcome Paul Bailey to the Business of Fun podcast. Paul, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Oh, I'm hanging in there. This is going to be great. You have so generously allowed yourself to be my first guest on what maybe will become a brand season of the podcast, because I was telling you before, I have been asked to teach a class for executive MBAs. I still got to sign the paperwork, so I won't tell everybody what the school is just yet, but this is going to be part of the things I share with the students. So I'm really grateful to have somebody whose work I really respect come on the podcast. And we are going to talk about brand. I even wrote questions, which is unusual for me. So this is great. So thank you. That was a long-winded way to get there. So I want to start out by asking you to share your definition of brand. And the way that I learned it was that everybody needs to have their own definition for what a brand is. That way it helps you do your job as a marketer and a brander better. Just to give you a second to collect your thoughts, I tell everybody my definition is that your brand is the accumulation of all of the interactions you have with your market, good and bad, over time, with the understanding that the good stuff adds up slowly and the bad stuff can knock you down in a moment.
Well, that's a good definition. But
maybe that's why they want me to be a teacher. I don't
know. Yeah, I can see why now. So I thought this was a brilliant first question because it's. I mean, I could literally talk about this question forever, but I think the first thing to say is what I just want to say what you've already said actually, which is I don't think that this is my definition of brand. I don't think and I'm not saying this is the definition of brand, because I don't think there can be one universal definition. Everyone has a different take on it. Everyone has a different understanding of it. I think some are better than others. But I think the only thing I ever say with clients is, this is our definition of brand. It doesn't matter. We're not saying that this is the only one, but this is what we say means brand when we're working together. As long as everyone understands brand means the same thing when they work together, then it's fine. So I have two definitions because I think brand and branding are two slightly different things. So I would describe a brand as the meaning or the feelings that are associated with a business or organization or a person, that are in perpetual evolution through the interaction of people, things, and ideas. How I describe branding is I describe branding as the communicative elements that reflect, represent, and reframe a brand in and for its current and desired future environments.
Yeah.
Because no, I was just going to say, I think so. Rather than objects of exchange, which brands used to be, I think that that a brand now is the sum total of relationships among the stakeholders. So a brand is a dynamic object in movement that develops through time from the relations of multiple agents, whether that's people, things, and ideas. Now, how I define things and ideas are there two kind of sides to the brand. So the things of a brand are like the appearance, the language, the product, the symbols, the imagery. The ideas of a brand are the principles, the reason for being, its history, its personality, its aspiration. And this is why I say that really, I use this term associated memorable moments. Mm-hmm. So I always say that your brand is shaped through associated memorable moments. What they are moments in time that people will remember and will associate with one another. That's how your brand is continually shaped.
I think that is a great explanation and a great definition. And one thing I'm curious about, I didn't even put it in my notes, or maybe I did. I don't think so, because you talked about meaning for a brand, and I agree 100% that brands are living things, right? Because it sort of goes with my definition, where like if you have start having these bad interactions with the market, your brand equity can go away. Which I think a good example, even as we're recording this, which is the 1st of February 2023, is like the last 2 or 3 months of Tesla, because they were so tightly connected to Elon Musk's personal brand that when he started acting like a bellend, I guess since I'm talking to a British guy, it undermined their brand very rapidly. And you saw it in the data. The data was very clear, starting from October 15th or thereabouts, when Elon Musk took over Twitter, the brand associations, the brand meaning, all those things, they took a hit, and it was visible in data and customer preference. But that wasn't the question. The question I wanted to ask you was about understanding that that brands have meaning, and that's your point of view. Does that mean brands have purpose, or is that in that whole idea around brand purpose? Because I see these things every day on LinkedIn and Twitter where somebody's like, "Oh, the 5th P is purpose," or "I got 8 new P's" or something. And my feelings, I'm curious to hear your feelings about brand purpose, and then I can go on a rant in a second. The space is available.
So I think a brand. Okay, so I think a brand is shaped around a shared meaning. So what I mean by that is there has to be some degree of meaning that is shared between the business and all the people who are connected to it, for there to be a brand. So I think a good thing to make this point is, when we talk about a lot of marketing that has become prevalent in the last 10 to 15 years of, very personalized marketing, that you might want to give people personalized messages, but you don't want people to have personalized opinion on a brand, because a brand is about fame. A brand is about being known for something. So unless your brand is known for something, and the example I always give is, in the UK, Volvo is known for being safe. Now everyone knows that Volvo, it represents safety. You can have any sort of number of brands that have, at the top level, what is it that they represent? And this shared meaning is what's shaping the brand. Now, is that brand purpose? No. I'm not a fan of brand purpose at all. I think brand purpose is a tricky subject because it means different things to different people. I would define brand purpose as a form of social or cultural purpose that a brand is working towards.
Yeah.
Now, the trouble with brand purpose is all too often the associated business. So that, by associated business, I mean the business that is linked to the brand doesn't really support the purpose of that brand throughout all of its actions. Because it's important to note that the business is not the brand. So, they're inextricably linked, but they are not one and the same thing. If a business genuinely lives the brand purpose, so there are businesses out there and brands out there like Patagonia, like Ben and Jerry's, who do it well, then brand purpose has validity. It's being backed up, so it makes sense. If it isn't backed up by every action of that business, then the brand purpose is empty. Brand purpose is worse than worthless.
Yeah.
Because if you claim something that people align with through a brand, and then they discover that the business isn't supporting that claim, you are going to feel a backlash very swiftly, and you will deserve it. In the terms of brand purpose, I also want to bring, if you don't know him, there's a guy called Nick Asprey, and his writing on brand purpose on the last couple of years is brilliant. So yeah, I think what I would say about brand purpose is, I think that brand purpose has become popular in the last 10 or 15 years because our role as consumers is subsuming our role as citizens. I think that a social and cultural purposes would be better served through people's role as citizens and not as their role as a consumer.
Yeah, that's interesting that you put it like that, because I've been reading this book, and I'll hold it up here for you to see. It's called The Midnight Kingdom, and it kind of it's by Jared Yates Sexton, and it talks about sort of the way that capitalism influenced that, like made people become like less involved in citizenry and became more consumerists, and that's had knock-on effects. And I would agree with that, because it's I'm writing an article for Work right now about pricing power and marketing, taking back the pricing power in their organizations. And a part of it's like that signal, right? Like, so our consumer choices now have become the signals that are the things we would do in our community used to be, at least the the way I think I saw that period after the Second World War, which was kind of like, I guess, like peak democracy, where people were, people were active, civically engaged, and like, really trying to build a better world. What I do want to follow up with you about here, though, is you talked about is this balance between saying and doing. Because if you do the research, right, or if you read the research, there's no doubt that people say that they want a brand to be purposeful, or they don't want the things that the companies that they buy from to be jackasses, is a way of putting it. But then you see what they do, and it shows that like purpose is at best a tiebreaker. And I'm trying to think about how. Oh yeah, go ahead. Good, you bailed me out of a question. Thank you.
No, because I think what you're touching on there is this actually touches on. I think this is actually a wider problem with marketing and marketing research, which is the types of research that are done sometimes don't help with what you're trying to do. So the question, I think what you're talking about is the questionnaires that go out, or the responses to surveys that come back and say, like, 87% of people will buy from a business who has their purpose or whatever. Well, that is fine, but it's a very different thing what people say they will do and what people actually do. Mm-hmm. It's totally different. So I think there's loads of really good books on this, which basically say, look, what people say they'll do when they're not in the situation of doing that thing. So saying to someone, would you buy sausages that are ethically sourced and all that sort of stuff, when they're in a room or wherever they are that's away from the moment of having to buy sausages, they're like, of course I would do that. Of course I would buy ethical sausages. I'm not a horrible person, but
no animals suffering for me.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But then take them to the actual moment of purchase, and there's all these other things that play in the head, like price and distribution. Like, oh well, I can't get hold of that one, so I'm going to get this one. There's all sorts of factors at play that aren't at play when they're asked the question. Yeah. And I think that kind of research is just so and then how it's presented is so I don't know. I find it quite depressing, to be honest.
What I know, because I mean, and this was sort of one of the things I definitely wanted to talk to you about, was the research aspect, right? That was like sort of a thing that we had gone back and forth discussing, because it's so hard to find it done well. But I don't think people understand how, if you can game a survey pretty easily through the way you ask the questions or the way you present the data. It does, and a lot of times it's not even intentional, in my experience. It's not like somebody sets out to be like, well, I'm going to show that brand purpose is the thing because, well, I need a thing. It's that they're looking at their research. They do this thing. They maybe ask a kind of faulty question, or they leave something open-ended that maybe they wanted a yes or no. The survey might not be designed very well. And then all of a sudden you've sat here and you've invested all this time and energy in this research. You got to have some insights out of the thing. And that's where, at least in my experience, a lot of this comes from. It comes out of like, I've done all this work, I got to have something to show for it. But yeah. I'm curious about your experience there.
So my experience with research is, I actually went back to study, well, this is years ago now, but I went back to study for my master's in brand at Goldsmiths University in London, and that taught me how to research, how to ethically research, how to research without writing leading questions, all sorts of things like that. The research I see now, I'll see an article come up and it'll be like, 87% of people think they need brand purpose or whatever. Mm-hmm. You look into that research a tiny bit, and you uncover the worst, like, I don't know whether it's a fact of people not having the training in being able to, like you said, I don't think they're trying to like do it badly. I think they're just doing it badly. I think that research is a really interesting topic because I work for a brand agency. We have lots of clients who have lots of research. So the thing that I find is too many clients of mine over the years have hundreds and hundreds of pages of research sitting in a desk drawer or sitting on a PDF on their computer. The trouble is they don't know what matters in the research and what doesn't matter in the research. They've commissioned research with no purpose or no focus. Now, research is very important, but what is infinitely better is to research the vital. So what I mean by that is to have a hypothesis of something that you might like to happen and then do backwards market research. So I don't know if you know backwards market research, but
I wrote an article on it for a trade publication.
Oh, well, there you go. But I think that type of research is so useful because you start with some kind of focus, and then you work backwards to either prove or disprove the hypothesis, and it works really well. And then at the end of it, you've got the research you need, and that's it.
Yeah, that's right. And that's I think you may have done the mini MBA in marketing.
Yes,
I'm not sure. Yeah. And that's like what Mark teaches us is like to do it backwards, right? It's like you start with the question you're looking to answer, you figure out how that thing's going to show up, and then you design your survey around the answers to the first two questions. And it's I think, and I'm curious, this will be a question to you too. It doesn't work 100% of the time because nothing does. The hit rate though on it is probably, in my experience, 90%. Right, you get something, you get what you're looking for, or you get pretty close to what you're looking for. It's very rare that I sit there and go, "My God, I still don't have any clue what I'm looking at." But you might have a different experience.
I found a similar experience. I think most of the time it gives you an answer most of the time. Now sometimes it doesn't give you the answer that you might be wanting. But that's the point. That's the point of doing it. So,
right.
I
do see that a lot, right? Which is that people design the survey, or they ask the questions, or they put their thumb on the scale just enough to get the answer they're looking for. Now, that is what I do see, that sort of bad research. But most of this brand purpose stuff, it's not intentionally set out to be bad. It just ends up being bad.
Yeah.
So I want to clarify that difference, because I see tons of that where I can tell they've designed the survey right away to get the answer they're looking for.
Yeah, that is true. But I mean, we do a fair amount of research at Halo, and like through other agencies, and we I think one good example would be for a client who we were actually doing some research on their distinctive brand assets. So we were looking to find out, we were being tasked with a redesign of their packaging and their brand. Now it was quite funny actually, because it was a very short time frame that we were working to. So as a lot of projects seem to be, but we were, so the studio was working on these like new designs and coming up with like new logos and things like that. And I put out some questions to a representative sample group, and then the responses came back about the distinctive assets and which assets were actually distinctive and which assets were actually like very important to keep. And the one that came back was their logo was over 80% of people recognized their logo.
Mhm.
And we were like, basically, I just like ran into the studio. I was like, look, I'm not being funny, guys, but you know, all that work you've done and designing new logos, scrap it because we can't change the logo.
Yeah.
What we actually did in the end was we sat down and we were like, okay, we can't visibly change the logo, but we can recraft it so that it looks better and looks more modern. And that's what we did. And we're still working with them now, rolling out the global rebrand. So it really does work. I mean, research is such a powerful tool. It's just not used very well that much, I don't think.
Yeah, and this distinctive brand asset thing, I'm glad you brought it up, because I didn't even have, again, I didn't even have this in my notes, but this was like a back, something I put in my newsletter on this Friday, and then there was a back and forth on Twitter because one of the colleges, pretty famous college in the States, their football team changed the color of orange, like and to be like similar to pretty much all the other oranges that that everybody uses. And all these like sports marketers were trying to justify it. And I go, like, you spend decades and decades building up an association with a distinct color of orange. And then all of a sudden you go, screw it. When I changed that color orange, that's like you've thrown away decades and decades of an asset, because it was a distinct orange, and now it's just a normal orange, and that will have a knock-on effect. So like knowing that 80% of your logo, people knew the logo, that's helpful, because I think people underestimate how important their brand assets are, and then how like repetition just makes them stick in people's minds. And if you change, you can tweak them a little bit, right? Or you should even play with them a little while, but you have to probably get to this point where you have 80% of people knowing who they are to be able to mess with anything, because then people will notice that you messed with it. And that's maybe what you want to do. But let me get back to like on task here, because what we were going to talk about was a lot of this research and some important things that I think play in all this stuff that we talked about so far. And I want to start at the top of the funnel, because most of the time when we hear conversations like we're having here, there's so much focus on bottom of the funnel. Last click attribution is never going to die. People are still like totally wed to it. And I think that probably your training is better, but similar to mine. And we know that like a lot of this the investment in last click attribution and short-term sales activation comes at the expense of awareness and top of funnel brand awareness. I'm curious to hear how you explain the need for both the people, especially when it's so easy to see those numbers clicking up in the short term from the sales activation campaign, so people can go, hey, why do I need to invest in this brand stuff? With the other side of that being, there's so many bad definitions and so many ham-handed conversations about brand that people, when they're making the decision, especially CFOs, they can go, it sounds like BS to me.
Well, okay, so I think the funnel is an extremely useful and powerful metaphor, basically. Mm-hmm. But we use it. We use it in our work in terms of how we help marketers plan out their channels and their comms, and we allocate their comms and channels to a part of the funnel, and then we use them. Some of them are top, some of them are middle, some of the bottom, etc. The funnel is a very powerful metaphor, but people seem to forget how a funnel works, because a funnel only works if you stick things in the top of it. That's how a funnel works. So some
of it spills over the sides.
Yeah, I know. So I've been in so many meetings with marketers, and they talk about feeding in the bottom of the funnel. I'm like, do you know how a funnel works, really? So, only trying to do marketing that focuses on the bottom of the funnel is just crazy. It's insane. That Les Binet and Peter Field and their work on the short term and long term is, it's brilliant work, and how they've identified the various things. I think last year Les Binet actually came out and said, look, there isn't this delineation between short-term sales activation and long-term brand building. That yes, there's some things that are specifically short-term sales. There's some things that are specifically long-term brand building. Most communication is a bit of both. It's it has to be. If you've got long-term brand building activations, long-term brand building, you can make that more effective in the short term as well. So I think that there's as well as Peter and Les, there's another bit of work that's been done by the LinkedIn B2B team, which was the 95-5 rule, which was that for a B2B audience or for a B2B business, 95% of your audience aren't in the market for your stuff right now. Now, that's not to say that they won't be interested in what you have to offer in a month or in 6 months or in a year. So the thing is, when they are interested, have you laid the groundwork by placing the right brand associations in their head? If you're not feeding the top of the funnel, you're not going to see customers moving through the funnel and becoming sales. That is how a funnel works.
Right. And now they've even updated it to be 99-1 in a economic downturn, which is like most people are not in the market right now. And so the goal shouldn't be to like going, let me just kill that 1%. It's like going, let me set the groundwork. Right. And I think that becomes where for B2B people, which we haven't really even touched on, excess share of voice actually comes into play, because it's going to be cheaper for you to invest in some of these assets and some of these associations right now, and it will pay off. And if you continue to invest, it will pay off in the short and long term. Because I did not know that Les said this about how some of it is a bit of both, short and long. But I actually in the article, I think I mentioned writing earlier, I talk about that. I go, the investment in your brand pays off now and in the future, right? But I didn't even know that the research backed it up. I just knew that from my own experience, which is like going, look, if you're spending money on branding, people still are buying today. It's just that like it sustains that level and actually grows it over time because those associations continue to strengthen. And so the next thing you know, your reflex is, I'm going to buy Bose headphones and not some other brand. Right.
Exactly.
I'm going to buy a new iPhone and not an Android device, because those things have become so tightly wound in your head. So that's great that's actually research to back it up. And the LinkedIn folks do some great stuff, because I've taken that bit of research and shown it to people too. Because I go, look, you're not investing in your brand. And this is part of the reason you're having a problem, because your brand equity is sliding. So that's, and I think,
and the thing is, just one more thing on that 60-40 split is that actually Mark Ritson has done a bit of work, or he gave a talk where he was talking about, and I think he might have been talking about some work that Les and Peter did, but the 60-40 split, it isn't like, it's an average, so there are differences within differences with categories are different, but there's also differences excuse me, there's also differences in the age of the business.
Correct.
So
there was a cool tool online that I saw, I don't know where I could find it now, where you could put in the variables and it would give you the split.
Okay, that'd be
good.
Yeah,
it was really great. I have to find it.
I mean, what Mark was saying was that a new business, the 60-40 split actually flips. So there's a 60% you should spend on short-term activations because you need to get some money in the door, but 40% is spent on brand building. then by the time you're sort of 2-3 years old, it flips back to like, or gradually turns over time. It should be 60% on your brand building and 40% on your short-term activations. So I think that kind of ratio is just a good guide. All it is a guide, but it's a good guide.
Yeah. Well, and I would be curious to ask you about this then, because I know all these guys and their work, and and it's like tremendous stuff. And if this is the first time people are hearing any of these names, go Google them, go find all of their stuff, because it's amazing work. And it definitely influences me, and like knowing their work and getting to engage with them has made me a better marketer for sure. But what happens is, I think that like the 60-40 thing, or even like B2B might be 50-50. What I found in my work is that most of the time the underinvestment in branding is so severe that even if you can get 10 or 15% of your budget allocated to specific brand building exercises, you're going to be far ahead of the competition, because most people they're just obsessed with the short-term sales activation. Yeah. It's like they don't even know where to begin to look and see, like, well, is that the wisest decision? No, we just got to do it now. And it's become such almost a reflex. But, and I mean, I see so little brand investment so often that it's alarming.
Yeah, I agree. And I think with our clients, I think so we do work for both B2C and B2B. Now, B2C is our B2C clients are a lot better at doing brand building communications, because they know they have to build the brand just through years of experience. So they're better. B2B clients, in the main, they seem to rely on sales teams doing sales activation. They don't look to build a brand. Now, we spend a lot of time and energy persuading clients that to create to shape make your brand more famous, it's worth the money. Now, we're not saying that you need to make everyone know about your brand. What we're saying is you need to make your audience know about your brand. I wrote an article on this, but I use a term, say, that's to make your brand niche famous. That's what you need to be niche famous. Find your niche and get famous within it. But yeah, we struggle to get clients out of the sales cycle, really.
Yeah, and this is where I'll get a chance to like offer up a nice little rant. I don't know if I'll get to use my most famous line, but I may. This is going to be great. It's that when I deal with B2B people, and sometimes even B2C people, they'd rather push penetration pricing instead of something that works. And if I could get people to stop the penetration pricing nonsense, it would be a great victory, because I don't think people understand how hard it is that without the investments in your brand, it is to raise your price.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't. I'll save the line for later, because discounts discounts are for dummies. But that'll come later.
But discounting is for dummies. Like to discount, it's the first step on this slippery slope down to the bottom. That's it.
Yeah, it's the fastest way to destroy any brand investment you spent is to discount. And I sat in the thing that Mark Ritson was doing, and he said, "Oh, I try to be absolute on it, but I know that it's impossible." And I go, "I'm absolute on it." I go, "You just don't do it," because I've found over and over again that as soon as I say, "Well, you can do it this one way or do it this other way," as soon as I open the door, it never gets closed, and people just they lose their minds over it. So I am absolute on it. You just don't discount. If you have to change the price, you can lower it, you can raise it, add some stuff to it, but you can't discount it. And it's not because you can't discount, it's because you must be careful about it. And people just aren't, because they, in the short term, you see a boost. What it is that people who are going to buy anyway and have just been kind of dragging their feet because of life, they go, oh, I'm going to get that now, because I saw the sale, which would have happened just if you had probably spent some money on some brand level advertising, but you would have got that boost of 10, 15, 20% that you were, that you're now cutting the price at.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, don't get me started on the discounting and the pricing. So when we're talking about these things like the 60-40 rule and the different splits and the difference between the top and the bottom of the funnel, I want to turn it back around to research, because this is the sort of thing. How do you use your research to help show people the wisdom of investing in the brand and investing all the way up and down the funnel? Because I think sometimes it's it's easy to fixate on one specific number, which is like, oh, people are clicking through this link at 40% of the time. This is amazing. How do you explain the relation? And that this is also a cheat, because I want to learn how other people do this well.
Well, I think the challenge is varied, because people have different takes on it. But I think one big take on it is, I think you touched on it earlier, is this last click attribution. I think last click attribution is just a disastrous idea that is just it just distorts everything, because what the last click attribution does is that last click takes credit for everything else that has happened before. So it's a crazy way of measuring, and I just try to explain to people what the brand does and what the process of buying something is. The fact that you would attribute anything to the last click is just crazy. It's nonsense. So I just try to explain why that is such a bad idea, and also the similarly with the sales activation stuff and the brand building stuff. I think I try to talk about brand as I think the big problem people have with brand is when you say like sales activation versus brand building. On the one hand, you've got sales activation. Now, the finance and the CEO and the CFO, they can see the benefit of a sale because it's a sale. It's money in the bank. The brand building part of it, they don't see the benefit, because it's like, well, okay, so I'm building a brand. So what? What benefit does that give me? Why is that a good thing? Why is that going to help my business? I saw something last year which was a nice little turn of phrase, which was about brand as the generator of future demand, which I think is a great little phrase. So yes, a sales activation might produce sales tomorrow, but building a brand, what you're doing is you are generating future demand for your brand, which is amazing.
Well, I think that's what's important for people to pay attention to, the long and short of it study, or like the work that, that Mark's highlighting, or, it's because now there's a pretty good library of research too that shows that, like, oh, look, if you started just from scratch and you said, oh, what am I going to do? And you said, oh, I'm going to put it all in sales activation for about 6, and this is my experience at least, and then I think the research backs up to to a large extent, is like for the first 6 months or so, things will go gangbusters, right? Because everybody still has all the brand associations and all of this, brand building that has been done maybe for years and decades before. If you stop investing in your brand, though, the drop off starts to hit around 9 to 12 months. And the first indication is that, like, you start to see those activation numbers decline, right? They're still probably fairly effective. This year 2, it starts getting drastic. And then by year 3, if you're the CMO or like the VP of marketing, you're looking for a new job because it's almost impossible to really move product at the price you've set up. And fortunately, there's now research that backs it up, because for a long time, you'd be sitting there doing projects, and the CFO would be like, well, yeah, I don't understand why we're spending this money on this. And you wouldn't have any numbers to back it up. But now there are numbers to back it up. And that's the encouraging thing, because if you are smart enough to just take a step back and say, what am I trying to do? If I know I'm like the average CMO and I'm going to be gone in 18 months or so, then sales activation, YOLO, and just go on and get your next job. If you want to be there for a long term, then you need to go like, look, we have to think of this as like a 3 to 5 year process. And what we have to do is make sure our brand is stable, and that we're supporting our brand, because what we're going to see is that this brand is going to take things up like this, but it's not going to go in a straight line. It's going to go, and then in years 3, 4, 5, you'll see it exceed anything you would have imagined if you had just spent on activation.
Yeah, and I think one big thing there is, and this is the responsibility of the marketing director or the CMO or whatever. It's really important to set the objectives, so to set what your goals are, because if the only thing you measure is sales, then your brand activity is going to look like it's not having an impact. But if you're measuring brand awareness, if you're measuring things like that, then you can show that there is change, there is improvement. So I think that it's really important when you set off on something like this, is define what you are measuring, decide what you are measuring, because otherwise the business will default to measuring sales, and then that won't have the impact that you want in the short term.
Right. And what you're talking about, just because people struggle with this idea, is you're talking about a simple brand tracking survey. And I'm curious, right? I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that, and I'm saying it that way. It's because I go in and explain it to people all the time. I go, you got to do some brand tracking. And I go, it sounds scary. What I've just said is probably something that's confusing to a lot of people. It's just a survey. And what it is there's probably part of your survey that never changes, because you want to be able to track these variables from year to year to see whether or not they're growing or they're falling. Because if they're growing and you want them to grow, that's great. You probably want to continue to do what led to that. And if they're falling, then you didn't want them to, then you have a problem that you need to identify and fix. It's that, right? And your survey probably, if you're a huge company, it might be 20, 25, 30 questions at the most. Maybe a third of those, somewhere between 7 and 10 of them, in my experience, should go to brand tracking, to things like, what are your alternatives? If I give you this list of seven brands, rank them for me. When I say X, who do you think of, right? Like stuff like that, so that you know where you are. I mean, it's that simple. It's not hard. It's just people get scared of it, because I think people don't explain it that simply to them.
Yeah, it's not hard. It doesn't have to be expensive at all. And but I would say that even if that level of research is too expensive for you or anything like that, I would suggest that there's an even simpler way to track your brand health, and that is in doing share of search. And share of search has been a relatively new development by like James Hankins and actually Les Binet as well, the pair of them. But share of search is literally just measuring or tracking the searches, like Google searches for your brand against a competitive set over time. And you just go to Google Trends, you track them, and you can track whether your search to like your people who search for your brand name are just going up or down, and your competitors are going up or down. It's that simple.
Yeah, and another one that I use, and if you don't use it this way, I'd be curious, like if you think I'm right or wrong. Another people have a mixed relationship with MPS, but I love it because it's like anybody can do it, right? And it's like it's not a perfect measure by any stretch of the imagination, but I use it for all the programs and all the classes and everything I do, because simply it shows that if the numbers going up, that people think more highly of you, and that your business is probably growing and your brand's probably getting stronger. It's not perfect, and if it's going down, the opposite path. It's really like a simple thing that you can do for nothing because you can do it in the Google Doc. I mean,
yeah, we use MPS. We use MPS for our research for Halo and for clients as well. But what I say about MPS is the actual score that you get is worthless. There is no benefit to the don't pay attention to what the number is. The two reasons that MPS is useful. The first one, like you said, is the trend. Is it going up or is it going down? That's what you need to know. The second reason that MPS is useful is the qualitative feedback that you get. The qualitative feedback is so powerful. We have shaped how we do business through this qualitative feedback. It's been amazing. So yeah, I think MPS is great, but the businesses who just show their score on their website, what are they doing? Don't know.
Doesn't matter.
But the trend and the qualitative feedback, it's fantastic.
Yeah, well, I would make one concession to showing the score. If you have a really good score, then you absolutely show it. Like I have a like I do each year. I'll do one for like my newsletter and my podcast, and I know that like the newsletter and the podcast, they sit around, and they've been pretty consistent, around between 50 and 65, so like there's a little variance, but they're pretty stable. So I think like sometimes when you got like I have a client that and there's a 65 was like going, which is the highest in there amongst their competitor set. I was like, of course you show that off, because I mean, not because it means anything, because it's great. That's the only time it matters.
Yeah, I would concede the only time a score matters is when in its competitive set it's the biggest. Like,
yes, exactly right. Yeah. Or like if you don't have, like, in the way I use it, I don't have a competitor set, but I use it as a point of reference. So I'm like going, look, you could be like, look at this thing. It's the I compare myself to like people who do like have bad ones, because it's like like somebody like I think I looked up like one of the ticket companies and they had like a -15, and I was like, mine's 50. I mean, that's to see how great I am. So it's like also important, like who do you frame it against?
Yeah, exactly.
It's completely pointless. The trend is what matters, and then that feedback. Those things are super awesome. Paul, I think we did cover everything. Even though I didn't ask it, not a single one of the questions I said I was going to ask you. Where do people find you?
So I'm on Twitter, Paul Mark Bailey. I'm also on LinkedIn, just Paul Bailey at Halo. We're a UK brand agency. LinkedIn and Twitter is where I spend most of my time. So I
should have wore one of the T-shirts. People have to buy the T-shirts.
And they buy the T-shirts. Exactly.
Buy the damn T-shirts. Mine says start with no one gives a shit.
come to the website and you can buy a T-shirt as well.
Yeah,
I didn't talk about the T-shirts. Oh god.
No, let's talk about the T-shirt for a second, because those things are awesome.
So the T-shirts were an idea that we had last year to to just get out there some well-worn marketing phrases, and the whole point is for people to get things on their chest. That's the point.
Yeah.
Have a look at the website.
Some really cool ones. I was like, there were so many I could have picked. There's so many to choose from. I was like, I want to start with no one gives a shit. Except for then I was like, that one's hard to wear around normally. But I was like, it doesn't matter. True. It made me laugh. So I was like, now I have to get another one because I need one I can just wear around more regularly. But no, they're great. They come in like a really awesome blue color, so, or at least mine did, and so it's great. So, but Paul, I want to thank you so much for doing this.
They're available in every color as long as it's blue.
Yeah. Okay. Just like with IBM, it's like you wear whatever you want to as long as it's gray. It's perfect.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Well, thanks for doing this.
No problem.
Let me know what you thought of my conversation with Paul by sending me an email. This is my name, Dave at DaveWakeman.com. Check out my website at DaveWakeman.com, where you'll find everything. You'll be able to keep up with me. You can sign up for newsletters and everything. Or you can go directly to talkingtickets.substack.com and get the newsletter. Businessofvalue.substack.com to get the strategy and marketing newsletter. Check out these upcoming workshops: New York, London, Sydney, Melbourne. Dates, programs to come. Just juggling my schedule due to a couple of things that just got put into the mix, and that's okay. I didn't mean it. Make sure you check out my friends at Cover Genius, the new CFAR product that we have been talking about lately. Cancel for any reason has been gaining a lot more importance to people because the data on what is driving customer buying decisions right now shows that giving people the peace of mind that something like CFAR offers can become even more valuable in this current environment where people just don't know with any certainty if they're going to be able to go to a show, economic uncertainties, health uncertainties, all kinds of uncertainties. This is exactly what CFAR has been designed to do. So check out Cover Genius at covergenius.com. Make sure you say hi to Joe and Haley, Chris, the entire Cover Genius team at the Ticketing Professionals Conference in Birmingham in March. Let's tell them I said hello. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to make it yet. Still a little up in the air, but just in case, though, you will be able to see the Cover Genius folks. As always, thank you so much for being here. I couldn't do it without you. If you dig the podcast, rate it, review it, share it. It helps a lot. And until next time, I'll talk to you soon. Take it easy.